Hi, this is Mark at learnhowtogarden.com, and in today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener we're going to be planting our onions, our autumn sown onions and our shallots. They're going to come all the way through the winter, and by planting them now it means that we will get onions 4 to 6 weeks earlier than if we plant sets next spring. We'll also put some sets in next spring so we get a longer season. But by getting these in now we'll get bigger shallots and we'll get them earlier. If you are watching us anywhere other than on our website, there's a link just under this video. By popping to the website and subscribing, it means that you'll get an email every single time we put one of our films up, which can be a couple of times a week, and it also means you get our free monthly newsletter, which has recipes and information on other topics in the garden, as well as the vegetables that we're sort of covering that month. Onions and shallots. You can plant them in the autumn, you can plant them in the spring, and my grandfather always used to sow onion seed on New Year's Day. But for ease, for most people, the easiest way is to buy these. If we look here, focus in, these are called sets, and they can come either this big, and this is one called Echalot Gris. This is a really beautiful gourmet shallot, down to these small sets here, which are a much more normal size. If you're planting them now, which is in the autumn, you're going to be planting what are called Japanese overwintering onions. They will come through the winter quite happily, the same as these shallots will. And the big difference between the two is that this single bulb of a shallot will produce a cluster of 8 or 10 shallots, whereas this set is going to produce a single onion bulb. But the one thing that all onions like is a slightly more alkaline soil. And if we look down at the bed here, and this is one of my deep beds, what you've got is a grid system, and this grid system's been put on for two reasons. The first is to show you how I'm going to plant the shallots, and I'm actually going to plant them where these grids cross, which is roughly 6 inches between the actual plants, or the bulbs, and about 6 to 8 inches between the rows. When you receive your bulbs, they'll tell you to have a bigger spacing between the rows than this. My experience has taught me that if you do that, you'll get much bigger single onions. In fact, in some ways too big to use in the kitchen in one go. And what you can do by using this spacing is to produce much more user-friendly sizing, bulbs that are perfect to use in one go in the kitchen. So I tend to do 6 inches each way, but I only do this if I'm using a deep bed. And a deep bed is a bed that you've prepared, it's been dug 2 spits deep, and it's very friable, it's very soft, it's got lots of goodness, lots of humus and compost incorporated into it. And just before you plant, I would suggest that you rake into your bed a couple of handfuls per square yard of calcified seaweed. If you've never come across calcified seaweed before, if you don't know what calcified seaweed is, I'll put a link to a video below this one that explains exactly what calcified seaweed is. So I'll rake this calcified seaweed in, and then we'll plant these bulbs. Now I know this might sound to some of you like teaching your gran to suck eggs. Raking is literally what it says. You gently move the rake backwards and forwards to work this calcified seaweed into the top layer of soil, and you create a really fine tilth. The other thing about the calcified seaweed, which is brilliant in this respect, is that it actually also improves the drainage around our onions and shallots, and they hate sitting in really claggy wet soil. In fact, when they arrive, if you're going to plant them, you'd be best if you'd covered your bed for a few days with a piece of plastic, an old piece of cardboard, so that you're not going to put them into soaking wet soil. And basically, like I say, raking is a motion of very gently going backwards and forwards. It's not digging in, it's not dragging the rake sort of so that you're moving the soil around. It's just this really, really gentle process of breaking up the soil to create what we refer to as a really fine tilth. And we go back to this, putting them roughly 6 inches apart. Now, if you focus right down here, you literally push this bulb in so that about half of it is in the ground and half is protruding. And the biggest problem you're going to have with these is that when you first plant them, you're going to have to cover them with a netting or some sort of covering above them to stop birds pulling them out. The birds won't eat them, but they'll get hold of these green shoots and they'll pull the bulbs out of the ground. It's the biggest problem with them, but they are the easiest things to sow if you're working in a deep bed. You can grow them just as well in a no-dig bed, but I've found using both that a deep bed really does work for these. And I would say if you don't have a lot of space, grow this one, grow the Shallot gris. It has got a real beautiful sweet taste. It's a real gourmet shallot. You won't be able to buy these in the shops, and if you do, they will charge you an arm and a leg. And we come back to the, if you've only got a small space, grow things that are expensive or difficult to get hold of, or you really, really like. Onions in a lot of ways are not the most expensive thing to buy. So if you've got space, I would say grow them. Certainly grow the overwintering ones because they'll come earlier. But shallots give you a better return than the onions. And as you can see, by planting on a square, it leaves you an easy space to be able to weed. And exactly the same applies to the Japanese overwintering onions. You put them in so roughly half the bulb is protruding. Don't be tempted to put them closer than 6 by 6 or 6 by 8 if you're using a slightly bigger spacing, because they are tiny sets. They're going to grow into quite nice sized medium bulbs. Just because they're tiny now, remember that they're going to have 6 months to grow. So 6 by 6 is definitely a minimum. We're just going to literally put the rest of these in, put a cover over the top, which for me is just some net on some hoops to stop the birds eating them until they grow, and leave them. Don't be tempted to feed them at this point in time. You don't want to create a lot of very, very soft, lush growth before they start to go into the winter. What we do want to do is get their roots down into the soil and start them off so that when we come into the spring, they're turbocharged into the spring and we get them 6 weeks earlier. And those sweet onions that early in the season are well worth the effort now. And the sun's come out, you see, the sun does shine on the righteous. So on a Sunday in October, when most people have either gone to the pub for Sunday lunch, or well, probably half the people are still having a lie in, get out into your garden. You'll feel better for it, and you'll certainly feel better when you're eating these in 6 months' time. That's Mark at Learn How to Garden with his halo intact, saying thanks for watching, until next time.